Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Sophie hated corporate events. Her high heels hurt. Her rented dress was tight. She was only in her second month at the company. But still, there she was in a crowded ballroom, trying to look confident on the night the new CEO was making his first official appearance. Act like you're comfortable. Act like you know what you're doing. Pretend this glass of orange juice is imported champagne, she kept repeating to herself, smiling with the glass in her hands. A man walked past her black tuxedo, perfect posture. "Waiter," she called out confidently. "Could you bring me a glass of champagne, please?" The man stopped. He slowly turned around and stared at her, like he had just heard someone say, "The sky is green." The silence lasted for several long, awkward seconds. He looked at her as if trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. Sophie, unfazed, added with a cheeky smile, "Make sure it's cold, okay?" He blinked slowly, a mix of surprise and curiosity in his eyes. But he said nothing. He simply nodded and walked over to the bar. A few minutes later, he returned. He handed her the glass, still wearing that confused expression, as if he wasn't sure if this was real. "Your champagne," he said, looking at her with an unreadable sparkle in his eyes. "Thank you, stylish waiter. You're efficient, quick, handsome. If you ever get tired of carrying trays, let me know. I'll recommend you to a 5-star restaurant." He raised one eyebrow, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. "Good to know." She took a sip, full of attitude. "By the way, you have that look like someone who judges silently. Am I right?" "I'm not judging. Just curious." "Curious about what?" "You're the first person to give me an order today. Then you probably need more orders. Stay right there and try smiling more." He laughed a soft laugh. The kind people try to hide, but can't help showing in their eyes. "Are you new here? And you're observant? Or maybe just good with faces? Or maybe just good at sounding full of yourself?" She shot back, taking another bold sip. He glanced at her glass, then at her. "Enjoy the evening, Miss Sophie." "Sophie," he repeated slowly, like trying a new flavor. "See you later." He turned and walked away, leaving behind a trace of expensive cologne and total confusion. Sophie stood there smiling to herself. The most arrogant waiter I've ever met, but efficient. Before she could pull herself together, the lights dimmed. The background music faded, replaced by a voice on the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. It's with great pleasure that we welcome the new CEO of our company. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for James Carter." Applause. Camera flashes. Phones up. Everyone turned toward the stage. Everyone except Sophie. Her glass froze mid-air. Her breath caught in her chest. The world paused for 2 seconds, because the man walking up the stage was him, the waiter. The so-called waiter, James Carter, the new CEO. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared in shock. He grabbed the microphone with ease, scanned the room, and, of course, found her in the crowd. And then he smiled. Not just any smile. It was the same smirk, calm, amused, intrigued from just minutes ago. Sophie choked on her own breath. She coughed, trying to act like she was just moved by the new CEO's entrance. A few people looked over. A lady offered her water. She waved it off with a gesture that said, "I'm fine. Just dying inside." "Brilliant, Sophie," she whispered to herself. "You just sent the CEO to get champagne. Congrats on your promising career." Sophie didn't hear a word of the speech. James's voice from the stage mixed with the buzzing in her ears. With every sentence he spoke in that firm tone, she wished more and more she could hide under the appetizer table. "I want to thank the board and every team member for their trust. Our future will be built with boldness, clarity, and teamwork." The only thing echoing in Sophie's head was, "You called the CEO a waiter. You told him to smile more. You offered him a job in a restaurant." When the speech ended, the applause returned, and James calmly stepped down from the stage, greeting a few executives. She had already turned around, quickly walking toward the exit. She needed to vanish, to breathe, to pretend she never existed. "Sophie?" She turned like someone caught stealing. It was Emma from HR. "Hey, did you see that? What a man, huh? Elegant, straightforward, but with such presence." Emma fanned her face with a napkin. "If I'd known the CEO looked like that, I'd have worn more mascara." "Yeah, pretty surprising." Sophie tried to smile, but her face felt frozen. "Are you okay? You look pale. I just need some air. I think the champagne was too strong." Emma nodded and pulled out her phone. "Go ahead. If you need anything, message me on WhatsApp." Sophie slipped out to the hotel lobby. and leaned against a marble column. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Maybe James hadn't even recognized her. Maybe he was the kind of CEO who bumped into so many people each day that he didn't remember faces. Maybe. Her phone vibrated. A message from the administrative assistant. Marketing team meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mandatory attendance. CEO will be present. She pressed the power button. She didn't want to think about tomorrow. She just wanted to go back about 30 minutes in time. The office was too quiet. The white lights, the constant hum of the air conditioning, and the distant sound of typing created a tense atmosphere for Sophie. It was 9:50 a.m. She adjusted her blouse for the third time, tied her hair in a bun she called her not trying to impress anyone look, and headed to the meeting room. At least 20 people were already there. She sat as far from the head of the table as possible. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened. James walked in dark suit, neutral expression, steady gaze, and to Sophie's horror, his eyes went straight to her. It wasn't just a glance. It was a look that said, "I know exactly who you are." James started the meeting in a straightforward way. He spoke about goals, the company's new phase, and upcoming changes. He went through each department, asked smart questions, and took notes. Then he reached the marketing team. "We have a major challenge here," he said. "Internal communication needs to be more effective, and the brand's tone needs to feel more human." Sophie wished she could disappear. By the way, James placed his hands on the table and leaned slightly forward. "I'd like to speak with Sophie Alvarez, if possible, in private." It felt like the air had been punched out of her chest. All eyes turned to her. "Of course, Mr. Carter," the manager answered before Sophie could say anything. James stepped to the side and subtly pointed toward the door. She stood up, trying to look calm, but the back of her neck was burning with embarrassment. They walked down the hallway in silence until they reached the president's office door. He opened it, gave her space to go in first, and closed the door behind them. "Do you always make men do what you want?" he asked, sitting calmly behind the desk. Sophie's eyes widened. "Sorry, I swear Relax. I'm not upset." He looked at her for a moment. "Just curious." "About what?" "About your boldness. It's not very common. I thought you were part of the staff. I swear I didn't mean any harm. It was natural. It was spontaneous. And for some reason I found it interesting." She blinked. "Interesting? You didn't try to impress me or flatter me or pretend you knew who I was. You were honest, direct, maybe a little bold." He gave a small smile. "And no one's done that with me in a long time." Sophie swallowed hard. "If you want to fire me, I understand. Fire you?" James leaned forward. "Actually, I'm thinking the opposite." "The opposite?" "I need someone on the executive team who sees things differently, who asks questions, who isn't afraid to make mistakes or speak her mind. I want to test that up close." Sophie narrowed her eyes. "Are you saying you want me to work directly with you? Temporary assistant to the president. 3 weeks of observation. If it works out, you stay. If not, you go back to marketing." She froze. "Is this serious?" James leaned back, arms crossed. "Of course it's serious. Do you think I'd make an offer like this just because you brought me champagne?" She gave a nervous laugh. "How long are you going to remind me of that?" "Probably until your contract ends." He stood and held out his hand. "Do you accept?" Sophie looked at his hand, then his eyes, then at the door, as if she still had time to escape. But deep down, something inside her had already decided. She shook James's hand. "I accept." Sophie barely slept that night. Her mind kept spinning in circles, like being stuck in a never-ending meeting. In theory, getting invited to work directly with the CEO was a huge opportunity. But in practice, it meant spending hours next to James Carter, the man she had mistaken for a waiter, and, maybe worse, the man who seemed to enjoy it. The next morning, she arrived at the office half an hour early. She was still trying to figure out whether this was a test, a challenge, or just some strange modern management idea. When she walked past the reception on the 17th floor, the secretary looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Sophie. Mr. Carter asked you to wait in the room next door. He's finishing a call." She nodded and walked into the room. A large desk, shelves full of documents, an elegant armchair, and a folder with her name on it sat on the desk. She opened it. Inside were the week's schedule, ongoing projects, and a temporary badge with the word executive printed in large letters. It was real. She was reading the materials when she heard a voice behind her. "Did you sleep well, assistant?" She turned around so quickly she almost dropped the folder. James was there, leaning against the doorframe, a slight smile on his face. "More or less," she answered. "I dreamed I was serving champagne at events, and someone mistook me for the company president." "Interesting. I had a similar dream, except I was the one telling someone to smile more." Sophie laughed and lowered her head. James walked over to the desk. "Here's what we'll do today. You're coming with me to everything: meetings, visits, calls. Watch, take notes, and ask questions. I want to know how you see the company from the inside." "All right, you're going to need coffee. Lots of coffee. I'm already in survival mode." He smiled. "Let's get started." The day flew by. Meetings with finance, alignment with legal, a video call with investors, and a surprise visit to the production area. Sophie didn't even have time for lunch. But in the middle of all the exhaustion, she noticed something interesting. James was a demanding boss, yes, but surprisingly attentive. He noticed the details, listened more than he spoke, and knew exactly when to push and when to step back. And to her surprise, he made jokes dry, clever ones, often directed at her. In the elevator, when they were alone between the 8th and 10th floors, he glanced at her notepad and asked, "You actually write things down by hand? It works better for me. Visual memory." "Interesting. Rare old school. Just because I write by hand doesn't mean I'm from the Stone Age." "Of course not, but it kind of looks like it." She rolled her eyes. He smiled. Later, after the last meeting of the day, Sophie went to the cafe on the corner near the company. She needed something sweet, preferably full of sugar and comfort. She sat in the corner of the room and pulled out her phone. She was replying to messages when someone pulled out the chair across from her. James. Her eyes widened. "Are you following me? Coincidence? I doubt it. I work in the building next door. This is the closest coffee spot. I come here all the time. You never came when I was here. Maybe you just didn't notice." She crossed her arms, suspicious. "You've been noticing me a lot lately, Mr. Carter. And you've been talking to me a lot, Miss Assistant." The waiter arrived. James ordered a black coffee. She ordered a slice of chocolate pie. "You like sugar?" he asked. "After a day of being your shadow, I need sugar to stay upright. You did well today. I thought you'd run away." "I'm still thinking about it." He took a sip of his coffee. "You know, most people get nervous when they walk into my office. I got nervous. I just covered it up with sarcasm." "You covered it up well." She took a bite of the pie and looked at the man in front of her. She felt calm, but her heart was racing. There was something strange about his presence. James didn't quite fit the image she had of a CEO. He was serious, methodical, but also human, and sometimes he seemed way too curious about her. "How many coincidences do you think will happen before the end of the week?" she asked. "Maybe a few more, maybe none. What if I told you I don't believe in coincidences? Then you'll have to deal with the idea that I'm following you." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" He didn't answer, just smiled, one of those annoying, unreadable smiles that leaves the question hanging in the air. The next morning, she went to the company break room to get some coffee before starting the day. The machine was free, but seconds later, James appeared. "Good morning," he said, grabbing a cup. "Are you following me again?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just have good timing." She picked up her mug. "You're impossible. And yet you're still here. That says a lot." She was about to reply, but the operations director came in urgently, calling James. "I'll see you in the office in 10 minutes, he said before walking off. "Sure. I'll be there as soon as I escape your coincidences," she smiled. And this time, he didn't smile back. He just looked at her a second longer than usual, as if something had changed, as if between one coincidence and another, he was starting to take this little game seriously. On Friday morning, Sophie was going over reports in the executive office next door when James walked in without knocking. He had his jacket over his arm and car keys in hand. "I have an external meeting. I need you to come with me." She looked up, surprised. "Right now? You want me to go with you? Like your personal chauffeur? You're my assistant, remember?" She stood up, grabbed her purse, and followed him. On the way, he didn't say much, just a few instructions about the meeting with a partner company. She watched him from the corner of her eye as he drove calm, eyes on the road, but every now and then, he glanced at her quickly, like he wanted to say something, but was waiting for the right moment. The meeting was shorter than expected. As they walked out of the conference room, James checked his watch. "It's past lunchtime. Want to grab something to eat? Sophie hesitated. She knew this felt like more than just work hours extending. Still, she nodded in agreement. They went to a quiet restaurant, dim lighting, soft music. They sat by the window. She was flipping through the menu when he spoke, without taking his eyes off her. You seem uncomfortable. It's not every day I have dinner with my boss. It's not dinner. It's still lunch. Doesn't help much. James gave a half smile. Relax. It's not a trap. She closed the menu and took a deep breath. If it is a trap, I'm already in too deep, so it doesn't matter. He called the waiter and ordered a simple dish. Sophie chose something light. Once the waiter left, he looked back at her. You really are different. Different how? From the people I usually work with, the ones who go out of their way not to disagree. I'm not good at pretending I agree. That's rare and risky, but interesting. Sophie took a sip of water. The conversation was getting too personal and too risky. If I were you, I'd be careful with that word interesting. That's usually where the chaos starts. Maybe that's what's missing from my life, a bit of chaos. She laughed, feeling more at ease. You strike me as the kind of person who does yoga at 6 a.m. Chaos doesn't suit you. And you seem like someone who doesn't sleep well, drinks too much coffee, and tries to control everything with lists. She raised an eyebrow. Was that a personality analysis? Or just a good guess? Observation. You observe too much. You run away too much. Sophie paused. He was right. Every time the conversation started to go deeper, she made a joke, changed the subject, pretended it wasn't about her. It felt safer that way. The food arrived. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, but there was a slight tension in the air, a quiet thread of expectation. James broke the silence. Are you seeing anyone? The question caught her off guard. She almost dropped her fork. Excuse me? Are you dating someone? She thought for a second. Something inside her lit up a need to build a wall between them. Yes, she lied without hesitation. James just nodded, but his eyes turned a little colder. Got it. She bit her lip. She regretted the lie, not what she said, but how he reacted. James wasn't the type to show emotions openly, but right then, he seemed disappointed. Why did you ask? She ventured. Because you seem like someone who's always keeping their distance. And sometimes I wonder if there's someone on the other side of the bridge, or if you're just afraid to cross. She swallowed hard. Do you always use bridge metaphors with employees, or am I special? You're special. The silence got heavier. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade for a moment. She leaned in, trying to change the subject. What about you? Are you dating anyone? No. It never works out. Why not? People come close because of the last name, the title, or the perks. And you think everyone's like that? No, but most are. Sophie leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Maybe. The check arrived. James paid before she could even reach for her wallet. On the way back to the office, the silence felt more comfortable. She looked out the window. He drove with focus. When they parked, she slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. Thanks for lunch or dinner or whatever that was. It was a break. She laughed. A good break. Before she opened the car door, he spoke without looking directly at her. If you ever want to cross that bridge, you don't have to lie about who's on the other side. She froze, felt her face warm up. She got out of the car, closed the door gently, and walked into the building. It wasn't until she reached the elevator that she realized she was still holding the restaurant napkin, crumpled in her hand like an important note. And for the first time since it all started, she asked herself, was he really asking about someone, or just wondering if there was still a place for him? On Monday, the company hallways seemed busier than usual. Sophie could feel eyes glancing over her shoulder, whispers in the corners, and, worst of all, poorly hidden smiles when she walked by. She tried convincing herself it was just in her head, but deep down, she knew exactly what was going on. The rumors had started. Did you see the two of them leave together on Friday? People say they had lunch at a fancy restaurant. Just the two of them. She's new, right? Barely got here, and already close to the CEO. The thing about rumors is that you don't need proof when people are ready to believe the worst. Early in the afternoon, while Sophie was organizing documents for James's next meeting, the HR manager, Olivia Ruiz, walked into the office with confident steps and a smile as fake as cheap lipstick. Good morning, Sophie. Is Mr. Carter in? He's in a conference call, but I'll let him know as soon as he's available. Olivia ignored the answer and stepped closer to the desk. I just came to congratulate you. You know, not everyone stands out so quickly. Sophie kept a neutral expression. Thank you. And especially with such an original method. You've got talent, girl. Sophie looked up. Is there something you'd like to say, Olivia? I'm just observing. Like everyone else around here. Be careful not to stumble on the stairs you climb so fast. Thanks for the concern. Don't worry, I know how to walk. Olivia gave a sly smile and left with the same toxic air she came in with. Sophie closed her eyes for a moment. It felt like being in a room full of warped mirrors. Nothing reflected the truth, but everything twisted just enough to create doubt. During the general meeting with the directors, James walked in with his folder and a calm expression. Sophie sat to his left, like she had been doing for the past few weeks. She noticed Olivia was there too, and there was something in her eyes' anticipation. When the meeting opened for suggestions and internal topics, Olivia asked to speak. Excuse me. Before we wrap up, I'd like to bring up a point. It's not directly about finances, but I believe it affects our work environment. James looked up. Go ahead. There's been some chatter in the hallways, and unfortunately, we can't ignore the atmosphere it's creating. Sophie felt her heart race. She also felt the eyes turning toward her, but she kept her head high. Rumors that some employees are getting close to leadership through unconventional ways. Personal and professional lines that may be getting crossed. An awkward silence filled the room. Olivia went on. With all due respect, Mr. Carter, transparency is something you've emphasized since day one, and I think it's only fair that we keep a clear line between favoritism and merit. Sophie stayed still, but inside, every word felt like a punch to the gut. James looked calmly at Olivia, then around the room. Finally, he spoke. If there are rumors going around, that's all they are, rumors. I care about what's done in the office, not what's whispered in the corners. And what about unexpected role changes, promotions, without a selection process? Any team member can be placed in a role where they show potential, even those who, although new, have shown above average ideas and professionalism. He looked directly at Sophie. And if anyone has concerns about this, my door is always open. Olivia didn't reply. She just crossed her arms and kept her posture. James turned to the group. Any other questions? No one said a word. The meeting ended. Hours later, after everyone had left, James called Sophie into his office. She walked in with a heavy heart. If you want to walk away now, I won't blame you, he said before she could say anything. Walk away? You don't deserve to be the target of gossip because of me. And you think walking away would stop that? James looked at her. They're attacking you because you're too close to me. It's not fair. What's not fair is hiding. He stepped a little closer. You don't need to protect me, and you don't need to feel guilty. There was a pause, a silence that spoke louder than words. Are you okay with all this? He asked. No, she said honestly. But I've learned to deal with unfairness. What I can't stand is being treated like I didn't earn what I have. I never thought that, but they do. James pressed his lips together. Then maybe it's time to show them who you really are. What do you mean? You'll be the one presenting at the next meeting. I want you to share the ideas you've been working on in that internal branding report. Show them that you're here because you earned it. And after that, let them talk. Time will take care of the rest. Sophie nodded, but deep down, it still hurt. More than admitting it to him, it was hard to admit to herself just how much it all affected her. On Friday, Sophie walked into the meeting room, holding her folder firmly, head held high. She knew some people were hoping she'd fail, maybe even rooting for it. James sat at the head of the table, like always, but his eyes followed her with the same confidence he'd shown the week before. Good afternoon. Today, Sophie Alvarez will give a brief presentation on internal communication strategies. The floor is yours. She took a deep breath and began. For the next 20 minutes, she presented data, research, comparison studies, and realistic proposals to improve communication between departments. She spoke clearly, confidently, and most of all, honestly. At the end, there was silence, then applause. It started off soft, but grew stronger. James was the last to clap, but his eyes said it all. Olivia didn't say a word. As Sophie was gathering her papers to leave, a director from another department walked over. Well done, Sophie. You were excellent. Thank you. I'd like to talk with you next week. We have a project that could really use your ideas. Sophie smiled, surprised. Of course. I'd be happy to. She left the room with lighter shoulders. James found her a few minutes later, near the elevator. Told you time would take care of it. She gave a small smile. Maybe, But what helped today was speaking up and being heard. You have more voice than you think, and more strength than you realize. Even when everyone's trying to knock me down? Especially then. She looked at him. You put me in that spot knowing I'd be exposed, because I knew you could handle it. And if you couldn't, then I'd be there to catch you. Sophie sighed. The elevator arrived, and she stepped inside. He stayed by the door. Before it closed, she said, "Thank you for believing in me. No, thank you for proving that not everything is just about appearances." As the doors closed, she looked at her reflection in the metal panel. For the first time in days, she saw someone who wasn't running. Someone who faced what needed to be faced. Someone who stayed. And on the other side of that door, there was someone who also stayed. Friday had seemed like it would end quietly, but the sky had other plans. Sophie stared out the meeting room window as the team wrapped up the last items of the afternoon. Outside, heavy clouds piled up like a dark army ready to attack. The sky was gray, thick, and heavy. And when the thunder rumbled for the third time, everyone knew the storm was going to hit hard. "Let's wrap this up before the rain traps us here until Monday," one of the directors joked. James gave a faint smile, but he didn't seem relaxed. He looked distracted, glancing between his phone screen and the window. Sophie gathered her notes and left before the hallway filled up. By the time she reached the building lobby, the rain was pouring down like the sky was falling apart. The sound of water hitting the glass made it feel like they were surrounded by a raging river. She turned on her phone and tried to call a ride. No luck. Every car was unavailable. "Perfect," she muttered. "No luck with the ride?" James's voice came from behind. She turned around. He had his blazer folded over his arm and was watching the rain with his usual serious expression. "No drivers available, and honestly, I'm not sure leaving right now is even a good idea." "I agree. Let's wait it out." They stepped back to the couch area in the lobby. They were nearly alone, except for a receptionist glued to her phone and a sleepy security guard. Sophie crossed her arms. "If I had known, I would have brought a tent or a surfboard." James sat down and motioned for her to do the same. "At this rate, the water level must be rising." She sat down, still a little tense. "Have you been through this before?" he asked. "You mean a storm, or being stuck in a glass lobby with my boss?" "Both." She smiled. "Plenty of storms. As for bosses, none quite like you." He raised an eyebrow. "Was that a compliment? Maybe. Depends on how you take it." James chuckled lightly. "So tell me, where did you grow up?" Sophie hesitated for a moment, but the rain, the break from routine, and the quiet comfort made her feel safe enough to answer. "BRS neighborhood, East Side. My mom still lives there. My dad left when I was 8. It's been just the two of us ever since. And her? She's doing okay, as much as possible. Health problems, advanced diabetes, a few complications, but she's still strong. She's got a huge heart." He nodded. "You speak about her with so much affection. She's my rock. She does the impossible with almost nothing." James stayed quiet for a moment. "I lost mine very young." Sophie turned to him, surprised. "I'm sorry. My parents died in an accident when I was 19. I was already working, studying, and suddenly I had to grow up overnight." She stayed silent, giving him space. "I spent years trying to prove myself that I could keep the family business going, that I could be the man people expected me to be. And in the process, I became someone who," he paused, "built too many walls." "Sometimes we need walls to survive," she said. "Yes, but after a while, they start to feel like prisons too." The rain outside was still heavy, but now it just felt like background noise to that moment. They were in a break from the world, a quiet space, away from social masks and everyday armor. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's why I admire your courage." "Courage?" "Facing a room full of executives, just waiting to see you fail. Standing your ground, and walking out with more respect than you came in with. I was terrified. And you still did it. That's real courage." Sophie felt a warm rush rise in her chest. He wasn't complimenting her performance. He was seeing deeper, and that scared her, but also touched her. A loud thunder shook the windows. She crossed her arms. "I hate lightning. Ever since I was a child. Come here." James took off his jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, she didn't even have time to react. "I'm okay," she said, even as goosebumps covered her arms. "You're shaking." She held the fabric and lowered her head. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, "Have you ever thought about leaving everything behind? Disappearing?" Starting over from scratch? Many times, but I never had the courage. What if I told you I think about it every week? He smiled. I'd believe you. She looked at him. Their faces were closer now. The sound of the rain created a cocoon around them. There was an intensity in James's eyes that she had never seen before, not in meetings, not even when he praised her work. This was different, more human, more personal. He gently touched her face, brushing a wet strand of hair from her forehead. You're stronger than you think, Sophie. Her heart beat faster. You too. You just forgot. His hand slid to her shoulder. His face was just inches from hers. She could feel his breath, feel the tension in the air tightening like an invisible thread pulling them closer. Then his phone rang. They both pulled away at the same time, like a cold splash of water had hit them. James picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and answered firmly. Yes? She stood up slowly, still with the jacket over her shoulders, and walked to the window. Outside, the rain was starting to ease. He ended the call and stood up. They're asking for an urgent decision on the curated branch contract. I need to take care of it today, she nodded. The storm is calming down. Do you want me to drive you home? No, I can get a car now. It should be clear. James looked at her, as if he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. She carefully took off the jacket and handed it back. Thank you for everything for today. Anytime you need. She began to walk away. He called her name. Sophie? She turned. If I had kissed you just now, would you have stopped me? She swallowed hard. I don't know. He nodded, understanding more than her words said. Good night. Good night, James. And she left. In the car, while the driver moved through the still flooded streets, Sophie leaned her head against the window. They hadn't kissed. They hadn't said anything too personal. But something had changed between them, as if the storm had taken a piece of each of them and left it there on the wet floor, the beginning of something they didn't know how to name. But they knew they weren't in the same place anymore, and maybe they didn't want to go back. Sophie stared at the computer screen, but wasn't reading a thing. The numbers, graphs, and reports all blurred together. For days she had tried to ignore what she felt, but it was like trying to sweep wet sand. The more she tried, the deeper she sank. Since that stormy night, James hadn't said a word, not a single mention of the almost kiss. No reference to what happened in that empty lobby, surrounded by rain and silence that spoke louder than words. And she hadn't said anything either. At the company, everything seemed to be going smoothly, at least on the surface. The team respected her more. Meetings flowed easily, and the projects were gaining momentum. But with every solid step she took at work, she felt more fragile inside. It was as if she had split in two, the professional woman who was growing and impressing others, and the woman who kept waiting for something that never came. Friday marked the final event of the year, the company's traditional holiday party, complete with speeches, tributes, and, of course, the much-anticipated champagne toast. Sophie had decided not to go. She spent the entire day rehearsing how she would hand in her resignation letter. She wrote it, rewrote it, and finally printed 2 copies, not because she wanted to run away, but because she felt like staying there was starting to affect everything, even her own beliefs. At 5:32 p.m., with the letter in hand, she took a deep breath and headed to James's office. The receptionist told her he was in a meeting with 2 investors and would be a few more minutes. Sophie thanked her and chose to wait in the lounge. She sat on a couch near the window. Outside, the city was starting to light up for the night cars. Horns, people rushing in every direction. The world kept moving, even when her heart wanted to stop. She closed her eyes for a moment, planning to leave without saying goodbye. The familiar voice made her open her eyes. James was standing in front of her, his jacket unbuttoned, his eyes fixed on her. She slowly stood up. The letter was in her hand. She was ready. I came to give you this. I don't think I should stay. He looked at the paper. He didn't take it. Why? Because it's hard working here, trying to be professional, pretending nothing happened, pretending nothing has changed. And what if I told you it's hard for me too? Sophie hesitated. That doesn't change what people think. And I'm tired of having to prove I belong here all the time. You don't have to prove anything, not to me, not to anyone. But I need to prove to myself that I can walk away with dignity. So that's it? She held out the paper without answering. James looked at the envelope, then at her. He didn't reach for it. You mistook me for a waiter. Then you wanted me to be just that. Now you want to leave like I'm still only that guy. James, no, listen. I was patient. I was professional. I was the CEO you needed. But I was also the man hoping you'd see. I wasn't just another boss in your life. Sophie felt her heart beat faster. His words were sharp, but there was pain behind each one. I did see it, she whispered. Then why are you leaving? Because I care. And when we care too much, we get vulnerable. I never asked you to protect yourself from me, but I asked myself too. Silence. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. If I asked you to stay, would you? She looked into his eyes. There was so much there, so much truth, so much fear, so much hope. I don't know. James took the envelope from her hands but didn't open it. Then let's make a deal. Come to the party. Just that, no decisions, no letters, no goodbyes. And after that, then you decide. The ballroom was full. Soft music played in the background. Servers moved around with trays, and guests toasted to the year's results. Sophie wore a dark blue dress. She had rented at the last minute. She hadn't planned to come, but she couldn't ignore James's request. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was hope. When she walked in, she felt the eyes on her, some surprised, others judging, but it didn't matter. She walked with confidence. Soon, she found Emma, who pulled her toward the marketing team's table. I thought you weren't coming. So did I. James is already here, but I don't think he's seen you yet. She nodded. She was there for him, she couldn't deny that, but she was also there for herself. A few minutes later, the host announced the start of the speeches. James was called to the stage. He walked up with his usual grace, but this time, there was something in his eyes. He was looking for someone in the crowd. This year was challenging, he began, but it was also a year of rebuilding, not just in goals and results, but in values and connections. Sophie felt his eyes find hers. Even with hundreds in the audience, she knew those words were for her. And if I can leave one last thought with this wonderful team, it's this. Sometimes we misread people. Sometimes we judge too quickly. But if we have the courage to look beyond the surface, we might discover that some misunderstandings lead to the most meaningful discoveries. The crowd applauded. Sophie's hands were trembling. Soon after, James stepped down and made his way through the guests. He walked toward her, and she turned before he even reached her. Would you dance with me, even after I tried to walk away? Especially because you did. She smiled, and the two of them walked to the center of the room. The music was slow. The steps were simple, but the silence between them was full of everything they hadn't said yet. Do you still want me to stay? She asked. I want you to decide for yourself, but yes, I do. What if I make a mistake? Then we'll fix it together. She rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long while, she felt light. The song ended. James picked up 2 glasses of champagne and handed her one. A toast, he said. To what? He raised his glass. To the mistake that turned into a meeting. To the confusion that became a path. To the beginning that felt like a mistake. But maybe it's just the right start. She smiled. To the stylish waiter. And to the woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Their glasses touched. The sound of crystal echoed, like a period or maybe a new beginning. The first day of the new year arrived with a clear sky and a soft breeze. The city, still sleepy after the celebrations, seemed to breathe more calmly. Sophie woke up early but wasn't in a rush. She made some coffee, turned on some music, and sat by the window for a few minutes, watching the slow movement outside. Her phone buzzed with Happy New Year messages, but she ignored them for now, not because she didn't care, but because that day, she needed to hear herself before hearing the world. It had been exactly a week since the dance, a week since James's speech, since the dancing, since the toast that seemed to seal everything, and still nothing had been decided. Sophie hadn't handed in her resignation letter, but she hadn't gone back to the company either. She asked for some time. She needed to think, and James understood. He didn't call, didn't pressure her, didn't show up. It was as if they both understood, without saying a word, that this time was necessary. But now, with the city waking up, the time to decide had come. At 10:00 a.m., she left the house with steady steps. She walked to a small coffee shop, hidden between 2 old stores. She sat at a table in the back and ordered the usual cappuccino with cinnamon. She pulled out a notebook she'd carried since college and began to write not a list of goals, not pros and cons, but a letter to herself. Sophie, you made it here through falls, stumbles, and so many new starts. Now it's time to ask yourself honestly, What do you want? Not what people expect, not what seems logical. What do you really want? She wrote for almost half an hour. Then she closed the notebook and looked at her cup. There was still a little coffee left. Already lukewarm. She smiled. She knew the answer. That afternoon, she took the subway and got off 2 stops before the final destination. She wanted to walk a bit, see the streets, the faces, the movement. She wanted to remember where she came from. She passed by the old school she used to attend. It was covered in graffiti, but still standing. She smiled, remembering when she used to rehearse plays in the courtyard. Back then, she dreamed of being an actress. Later, life took her in a different direction. But a part of that dream still lived inside her, the desire to tell stories, to move people, to express herself honestly. And maybe that's what James saw in her. At 5:00 p.m., she arrived at the company building. The employees had the day off. The lobby was empty, but she knew he'd be there. She went straight up to the 17th floor. When the elevator doors opened, her heart raced. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. She knocked on his office door and walked in without waiting. James was standing by the window, white shirt, sleeves rolled up, distant look. When he saw her, he didn't say anything. He just smiled. "I'm back," she said. "I noticed, but not in the way you think." He turned. "What do you mean?" Sophie took a few steps forward, stopping just a few feet from him. "I came to say, I've decided to stay. But not here, not in this position, not under your shadow." James frowned, slightly surprised. "You want to leave? I want to fly. I want to build something that's truly mine, not because I'm running away, but because I'm ready." He nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes, admiration. "What are you going to do?" "I accepted an offer to lead a community media project. I'll be heading a program that brings together young people from low-income neighborhoods with workshops in writing, theater, and video. It's not the highest position, and it's not the biggest paycheck, but it's real." James smiled, genuinely. "That suits you. I've learned a lot here from you, from everything I've lived through, but I've also learned how to listen to myself. And my voice is calling out for something new. I'm proud of you. Thank you." Silence. "So, does that mean we're also over?" he asked directly. She took a deep breath. "It doesn't have to end, but it doesn't have to begin the wrong way either. What would the right way be? When it's not boss and employee, when it's just James and Sophie, 2 people, 2 choices, 2 paths that cross because they want to, not because they have to." He stepped a little closer. "I want to see you happy, even if it's from a distance. But if I could choose, I'd rather be by your side. Then find me later on when everything is clearer, when it's not about running or impulse, but a real decision." James nodded. There was understanding in his eyes, and a kind of respect that said everything. "I'll wait gladly. I'll come back for sure." She smiled. He smiled too. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. They just looked at each other, knowing this wasn't the end. This was a new beginning. 2 months later, Sophie was running through the backstage area of the small community theater in Jardim Alvorada. It was the first show put on by the kids in the project. The chairs were full, the parents emotional, and the students nervous. Wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and a simple name badge, she felt more important there than in any boardroom meeting. Behind the curtain, a 12-year-old girl was shaking with fear. "I can't do it, teacher. I'll forget everything." Sophie knelt in front of her. "You've prepared. You know your lines. And even if you make a mistake, the most beautiful part is trying. You know why? Why? Because courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing it even when you're afraid." The girl smiled. She went on stage, and she nailed it. Sophie wiped her eyes and sat at the side of the stage. She watched every line, every laugh, every round of applause. At the end of the performance, she went on stage and called all the students. "Today, you showed the world the strength inside each of you. This proves you can go anywhere you want. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The audience gave them a standing ovation. Backstage, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned and froze. James' jeans, an open collar shirt, and a shy smile. "They told me you were working miracles around here." She laughed, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Dropping off an emotional performance report." "Was it approved?" "With honors." She hugged him, a long, sincere hug. "You've changed," she said. "So have you." She took a step back. "How did you hear about the event?" "Emma. She told me you were running a project here. Said you were shining more than ever." "And what did you think?" that she was right. And the company? It's doing fine, but I think I missed my assistant. That position doesn't exist anymore. I'm now the youth talent coordinator. Really? He joked. Any openings for a handsome, stubborn guy who's a part-time CEO? Maybe if he's humble enough to start from scratch. James smiled. I am, and I've got courage too, even when I'm scared. She stayed quiet for a moment, then held out her hand. Welcome, James, to my world. He took her hand, and this time, there were no barriers. The kiss came naturally, like the reunion of two people who were never meant to say goodbye. Sophie felt finally at home, not at a fixed address, but in a place within herself, a place where love wasn't a prison. It was a choice, and she had chosen. James showed up at the project more often than Sophie expected. The first time, she thought it was just a kind visit. The second, she thought he was being polite. But by the third time, when he showed up carrying costume boxes and left covered in paint, after helping the teens with the set, she understood he wasn't there out of obligation. He wanted to be there. You know you don't have to do all this, right? She said, folding sheets they were using as curtains. I know, but I like it. You, James Carter, like painting walls and moving chairs? I like seeing you like this, he answered without hiding it. She laughed, but her cheeks turned red. After that night, at the theater, the kiss and the reunion started a new chapter for the two of them. There was no rush, no big promises, but there was presence, support, a feeling that was growing slowly, like something planted with care. James, outside the company, was different, still serious sometimes, but his smiles were lighter. He laughed more. He had this charming way of being amazed by small things, like a child performing Shakespeare, or an 8-year-old boy reciting a poem full of made-up words. One afternoon, Emma came by the project to do a piece for the company's internal newsletter. Sophie showed her around, proud. You know you've become a legend, right? Emma said. Me? The assistant who shook up the CEO and then walked out the front door? Everyone admires you now. Sophie gave a modest smile. I just did what I had to do. And now you're back to shake his heart again? This time is different. I came back for me, and if he wants to come along, great. If not, I'm still whole. Emma hugged her. I'm so proud of you. Meanwhile, James was in the courtyard, trying to set up a scene with two boys arguing about where to hang a paper star. But it can't be crooked, one shouted. If it's not crooked, it's boring, the other replied. Standing between them, James just said, I think we can have a slightly rebellious star. How about that? Sophie watched the scene from a distance, her heart feeling light. On weekends, the two of them would meet outside the project setting. They went to cafes, bookstores, and sometimes just walked quietly through the city. On one of those walks, James stopped in front of an old building downtown. This is where my parents opened the family's first store. Is it still open? No, it's a snack bar now. But every time I pass by, I stop for a moment. Do you miss it? I do, but I've learned that things change, and sometimes they change for the better. She squeezed his hand. He laced his fingers with hers. You've changed a lot in me, Sophie. You changed me too. You gave me the courage to follow my own path. He looked into her eyes. Isn't it funny how it all started with a glass of champagne? She laughed. And with you thinking I was the waiter? No, with you thinking I was. She burst out laughing. I still think that tux made you look like someone who serves drinks. And now? Now you look like someone who brings me coffee on Sundays. Is that a hint? A very clear one. The next Sunday, James showed up at her place with a bag of cheese bread, a box of tea, and a proud look on his face. I didn't bring coffee, but I brought the rest to breakfast. That's a great start, she said, pulling him inside. The morning went by slowly, with light conversation, laughter, and soft music playing in the background. She baked the bread in the oven, while he set the table. When they sat down to eat, Sophie looked at him for a moment. James, do you think we could keep this simple without overcomplicating things, without turning it into a tired routine, without becoming just another story that starts strong and ends in silence? He thought for a moment. We don't need to make promises. Just choose each other one day at a time. And if it doesn't work out, at least we tried. No promises of forever. How about just until tomorrow? She smiled. Deal. Until tomorrow. At the project, things were also starting to settle. Sophie welcomed new volunteers every week, which allowed her to focus more on the creative side, developing new workshops, audiovisual projects, and a partnership with a publisher to release a book with texts written by the children. James, even with his other responsibilities, always stopped by whenever he could. And when he couldn't, he sent playful messages. Has the crooked star straightened up yet? The boy who recites made-up poems wants to be my business partner. Do you also feel like you're living the life you're meant to live? She replied with photos, voice notes, and sometimes just a heart, because sometimes that was enough. For the 3-month anniversary of the project, Sophie organized a special performance with the younger students. Parents were invited, as well as partners and donors. She hesitated to invite James. She didn't want everything to revolve around his presence, but he showed up anyway. At the end of the presentation, one of the girls handed her a little note, decorated with glitter. "Aunt Sophie, you look like a real princess. Thank you for showing us we can dream." Sophie read it, touched. As she left the stage, she found James waiting by the exit. "Did you read the note?" She nodded. "You deserve to hear that every day. Not every day is easy, but the ones that are make up for the rest." She stepped closer. "Have you ever thought about making a real change? A change? Leaving that company, doing something more human? You mean join you here? Not right away, but one day. If you want." He smiled. "I think about it every day, but I want to be sure that when I do it, it's not just for you. It has to be for me too." "Fair enough. In the meantime, can I keep painting walls and bringing cheese bread and holding your hand if you want?" "Always." One Saturday afternoon, while they watched the students painting backdrops for the next play, James turned to her. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. The day you asked me for champagne, I was tired, annoyed, and feeling like that company was going to swallow me whole, and I was just one more headache. You were the only thing that made me laugh that day." Sophie went quiet. "And ever since then," he continued, "every time I think about giving up, I remember the way you looked at me and said, 'You're impossible.'" She laughed. "Because you are. But even so, you stayed. And so did you." He stepped closer and rested his forehead against hers. "I'm glad I wasn't just another waiter to you. I'm glad you weren't just another boss to me." The sun was setting behind the buildings. Children were laughing and running in the background. The city was alive, full of energy. And right there in that simple moment, they both knew they had found something rare, something that came from the unexpected, but that now felt completely real. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Sophie woke up to sunlight coming through the curtains and James's voice coming from the kitchen. "Coffee or tea?" he asked, not looking. "And before you say anything, yes, I'm trying to get your cappuccino just right." "Cappuccino with cinnamon," she replied, sitting on the couch. "If you mess up the cinnamon, I'm canceling the contract." "What contract?" "The one where you get my attention for an undetermined amount of time." James laughed and walked over with the cup, putting on a dramatic air. "I hope I passed Miss Sophie's inspection." She took the cup, had a sip, and pretended to think. "I'd give it an 8, but I'll keep the contract out of respect for your effort. That's the highest I've ever scored. Am I going up in your personal stock market?" A slight increase. Things had become naturally light between them. They didn't need to fill every silence with words. Sometimes, just being in the same room was enough. Other times, sharing a cup was all it took. But that morning felt different. There was a subtle weight hanging between the light phrases. Sophie noticed at first, James seemed restless. He fidgeted with the silverware, ran his hand through his hair too often, and avoided looking at her for more than a second or two. "Did something happen?" He hesitated, then carefully set the napkin on the table. "I got an offer." She slowly swallowed her sip of cappuccino. "An offer for what?" "Business expansion. An international project. 3 years in New York." The silence between them grew heavier. She looked at him, trying to understand all that was behind such a simple sentence. "Are you going to accept it?" "I haven't decided yet, but it's a big opportunity." She nodded, tried to smile, but her face stiffened. "Of course. It really is." James picked up the cup and turned it in his hands. "I don't want this to change what we have, but I also don't know what we have means if I'm in another country." She took a deep breath. "James, we never made promises, remember? It was always until tomorrow. I know, but I want there to be many tomorrows. And what if there are, even with you far away? Do you think you could handle that?" "I don't know." The honesty cut deeper than any silence. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, head down. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want you to find out from the media, and because your opinion matters." She closed her eyes for a second. "I want you to accept it, if that's what you really want, not for me, for you. And if what I want is to stay, then stay." but do it for yourself too. He moved closer, sat down beside her. Sophie, I love you. She didn't answer right away. She looked at him, at those eyes that always seemed so sure, but now just looked human. I love you too, James. But love won't stop time or distance from doing what they do. If you go, it'll be hard. If you stay, maybe it will too. And if nothing works out, at least we were honest until the end. James nodded. I just don't want you to feel like you're being left behind. I'm not. I'm walking at my own pace. In the days that followed, the topic didn't come up again. James kept helping with the project, but less and less. The company meetings started picking up again. Sophie gave him space. She kept creating, leading, and smiling. But deep inside, she already felt the thread of separation being stitched, one careful stitch at a time. On a Thursday night, she was organizing the scripts for the new play. She was in the small office when Emma walked in with a bag of snacks and a curious look. Okay, you're going to tell me now, or I'm stuffing you with cheese puffs. Tell you what, James. I saw his face during rehearsal. It looked like one last look before leaving. Sophie bit her pen cap. He got an offer. New York. Wow. 3 years? Are you going with him? No. And he didn't even ask. Do you want him to stay? I want him to choose to stay. I don't want to be the reason someone feels stuck. Emma nodded. And if he goes? I keep going. And if he comes back, we'll see. You're really strong. It's not strength. It's survival. The next weekend, James showed up at the theater with 2 cardboard boxes. These are the first book donations from our partner publisher. Thought I'd bring them myself before the post office lost them. I thought you'd already be in New York, she said, half smiling. Not yet, but maybe I'm on my way. She nodded, didn't insist. Would you like to watch a rehearsal? Sure. They sat in the last row. The children were rehearsing a reconciliation scene written by one of the shyest students. One of the characters said, I left because I thought the world was bigger than you, but I found out the world without you was smaller than anything. Sophie felt her stomach turn. James did too. When the rehearsal ended, both remained silent. That line, he began, was written by Lucas, 11 years old. He had never written anything before. He knows what he's talking about. Kids always do. James took her hand. I haven't left yet. The transfer was postponed, but the decision is still here, he said, touching his chest. And have you made your choice? Not completely. The truth is, part of me wants to grow out there, but the other part doesn't want to leave the place where I found peace. She squeezed his hand. Then don't rush. Just don't ask me to wait. I never would. She smiled. Because if I'm going to have you, James, I want all of you, not just a part. On Monday, she woke up to find an envelope under her door. It was from James. Inside was a handwritten note. Sophie, I don't know what I'll choose tomorrow, but today I know this. You saved me from myself, and wherever I go, with you, everything feels more real. See you soon, Jay. And with the note, a small leather bracelet with a tiny airplane charm. Sophie held it, not knowing if it was a goodbye or a wait for me, but she knew it was sincere, and for now, that was enough. When James left for New York, there was no proper goodbye. He didn't show up at the project that day, no message, no call. Sophie found out through Emma, who got an internal company memo. CEO James Carter begins new international cycle at the American headquarters, duration unknown. It felt strange, but it wasn't unfair. Sophie understood. Maybe he didn't have the strength to leave with her looking at him like that. Maybe he chose to carry that last touch of hands as a silent goodbye. She respected that, but it hurt. The weeks that followed felt longer than the days allowed. She filled her time with everything she could: more workshops, planning the new play, traveling to raise funds. At night, she answered emails until late, even when she didn't need to, as if the sound of typing could drown out the silence James left behind. At first, he sent short messages, made it here safely. Small apartment, but cozy. First international meeting today. I'm as nervous as an intern. Found a coffee shop like ours. Almost ordered cappuccino with cinnamon. She replied carefully, afraid of sounding like she was expecting too much. But slowly, the messages faded, first once a day, then once a week, until they stopped. Not because of a fight, not because the feelings were gone, but because sometimes life pushes people in different directions, and what once felt so strong starts to fade with time. Sophie didn't push. She respected the silence, the way one respects a season that arrives without warning. But she kept his note inside the book she read every night. and she wore the bracelet with the little airplane every day. One afternoon, she sat in the project's cafeteria next to a new volunteer, Daniel, a history teacher with a kind smile and a calm voice. "Have you ever had someone change your life just by being in it?" he asked, as they shared a piece of cornbread cake. Sophie thought for a moment. Yes. But he didn't just pass through. He stayed, even from far away. And does he still change your life? Every single day. Daniel didn't ask anything else, and she was grateful for that. The kids missed James. They always asked, "Is the guy with the crooked star coming back? The one who brings cheese bread? Sophie's boyfriend?" She laughed. Sometimes she said, "I don't know." Other times maybe. But deep down, part of her wanted to know too. One day, Lucas, the boy who wrote the reconciliation scene, handed her a new note. He went far away. But sometimes, people go far just to learn the way back. She held that note tighter than she expected. In the 4th month after James left, Emma showed up with an envelope. "I probably shouldn't show you this, but I think you need to see it." It was a business magazine, a special edition on executives working abroad. In the center spread, an interview with James. New York is a school, but what taught me the most was someone who's not here. She showed me what it means to be present, even in absence. Sophie read that line over and over, not knowing if she should smile or cry. He was thinking of her, but he didn't say it. She was too, but stayed quiet. Then one day, when she arrived at the project, there was a box waiting on her desk, no sender. She opened it carefully. Inside, there was only a brown envelope, and a photo James sitting on a park bleacher with a child on his lap, smiling. Inside the envelope, a new note. "Sophie." The words escaped me, but the longing never did. "This photo was taken on a Saturday, while I wondered if you were under the same sun as me. I don't know what we are now, but I do know you're still my north." She leaned her forehead on the table and cried, no sound, no drama, just a tear that needed to come out. Time went by, a whole semester. The new play was a success. The students were featured on local TV. The city officially supported the project. Sophie was nominated for a Social Impact Award. She smiled at all of it. But there was a space inside her that couldn't be filled with accomplishments. It was the part that remembered his quiet laugh, the comfortable silence, the talks about everything and nothing, the hands that fit perfectly in hers like they were meant to. But she moved on. She moved on because she loved. And love, she had learned, also meant letting go. At the beginning of winter, something happened that changed the pace of the city. An international cultural festival announced it would showcase a children's play inspired by a Brazilian social project. It was her project. The organizers reached out. They wanted to bring the play to New York. Sophie read the email twice before she believed it. She gathered the team. She shared the news, holding back emotion. "We're going to perform our play in another country. We're going to show our children to the world." The children cheered. The volunteers hugged. But inside, a quiet storm was forming. New York, he would be there. During preparations, she handled everything: logistics, flights, permits. She didn't mention James to anyone. They arrived in the city the weekend before the performance. The students stayed in a modest hotel. She shared a room with Emma. On the night before the show, while organizing costumes, Emma asked, "Are you going to look for him?" Sophie replied without looking, "I don't know if I should. Will he look for you? Maybe he already did and didn't find the woman I no longer am. And what if she's still somewhere inside you?" Sophie gave a sad smile. "Then let him find her. But not because I asked him to, because he wanted to." On the morning of the show, everything went as planned. The children were charming. The foreign audience gave a standing ovation. Sophie, full of emotion, was called on stage. She received flowers. She gave a speech. This project was born from scarcity, but it bloomed with love. And today, it crosses oceans, not out of ambition, but out of love. She didn't see it, but someone in the back rows got up and left before the end. That night, back at the hotel, while she was organizing the materials, someone knocked on the door. Emma answered. "It's for you," she said, pointing. Sophie walked to the door and stopped. James jeans, dark jacket, quiet eyes. "I saw you on stage. I wanted to leave before our eyes met too soon." She said nothing. "I wanted to be the one who deserved to stand on that stage with you. But the credit is all yours." She just nodded. "I haven't stopped thinking about you, Sophie, but I needed to find out who I was without you around. And now I think I finally understand." "Understand what?" "That you're not my world." You're the compass, and the world is mine to choose, and I choose to come back to wherever you are." Sophie felt her chest tighten. I needed time too, and I understood that truly loving someone means letting them go. But sometimes, when they come back, she took a step. We realized that love was just quiet. It never stopped. He touched her hand. "Is there still a place for me in your world?" "There always was." He smiled. She cried. And for the first time in many months, the silence between them wasn't empty. It felt like home. The project left a deep mark on the city. After the show in New York, the children were invited by schools and nonprofits to share their stories, their plays, and their voices. Sophie kept managing it all with passion now, with more volunteers, better structure, and more peace. James continued consulting for U.S. companies, but with a much lighter schedule. He started turning down offers that didn't align with his values. He managed a few good contracts, and with the rest of his time, he made sure to be close. On weekends, they wandered through small towns in upstate New York. James said he wanted to discover places that don't show up in travel guides. Sophie said, deep down, he just wanted excuses to eat apple pie from farmers' markets. They laughed about that. They laughed about everything. They laughed with each other, and that made everything feel lighter. But on that particular Saturday, James was acting differently. "Trust me, Sophie. It's just a walk." James Carter, "You once took me to paint a wall, calling it an art picnic. I have reasons to be suspicious. But you painted the most beautiful star I've ever seen. It was crooked, but unique." She laughed, but agreed. In the car, he gently placed a blindfold over her eyes. "This isn't a kidnapping, I promise. If it's somewhere with coffee, I won't report it. It'll have more than that." When they stopped, James slowly removed the blindfold. The scene looked like a movie, a flower field, overlooking a calm lake, lights hanging from the trees, cushions under a white canopy, and 2 champagne glasses on a small, rustic wooden table. Photos of the two of them were hanging on strings, forming a delicate and fun timeline from the champagne request to their last hug at the theater. Sophie blinked several times. "James, what is this?" He didn't answer. He took her hand, walked to the center of the lawn, and knelt down. Sophie covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filled with tears. "I've waited so long for this moment, and now I want it to last forever," he said. "I can't believe this. Sophie Mendez, you came into my life turning everything upside down, including my identity. And after that, you taught me that love isn't about certainty. It's about choice." She was already laughing through tears. "You taught me that I can let go of control and still feel whole, that I can be the CEO of my heart, but only if you're my partner in this story." She shook her head, emotional. "So I ask you, with everything I am, will you marry me?" He opened the box. The ring was simple, with a little star-shaped stone. "Yes, the crooked star." "James, are you serious?" "It's the most crooked and beautiful star I could find." She knelt too and hugged him tight. "Of course I will. I want to now, tomorrow, and forever." He spun her around on the grass, laughing. She knocked over a cushion, almost fell on the table, and they laughed more than they cried. "But only on one condition," she said. "What is it?" "That you keep serving me champagne, even when we're 80. Deal." The wedding was held at a vineyard in the Finger Lakes region, known for its sweet wines and green fields overlooking the lake. The day was cool, the sky clear, the breeze light. Sophie wanted everything outdoors, among vines and trees. She wanted the kids from the project to be there, and they were. Some walked in holding funny signs. He finally realized it was love. The bride's still the boss, but now with a ring. Champagne and a star, started crooked, ended perfect. James walked in to the sound of a violin, wearing a nervous smile, adjusting his jacket, whispering to his brother that this was the hardest speech of his life. Sophie walked in without a veil, wearing a light dress and flowers in her hair, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. She walked slowly toward him, eyes filled with tears. The guests stood in silence. When she reached him, James whispered, "I love you." She smiled and replied, "I love you too. Now hush, before I start crying." The ceremony was led by one of the teachers from the project, who said, "This union began by chance but grew with purpose. They chose love every day, even on the quiet ones. That's rare, that's real." Then came the vows. James went first. "Sophie, you taught me to laugh at myself, to respect my silences, and to turn fear into bridges. With you, I learned that life doesn't need to be a perfect spreadsheet. It can be a play full of improvisation and still be the most beautiful of all. She wiped her eyes. James, you showed me that even CEOs have hearts, that even the most logical man can learn to feel deeply. With you, I discovered that love can be home, and that my home always had your name on the door, even when you were far away. They exchanged rings to applause, and at the end, they toasted with, of course, champagne. At the reception, James planned a surprise, a small stage where the children performed a scene about a boss in disguise who falls in love with a brave heroine. It was hilarious, sweet, and full of references everyone understood. Sophie laughed the whole time. At the end of the performance, one of the girls gave her a new crooked star made out of shiny paper. Aunt Sophie, so you never forget how it all began. She held the gift like it was a trophy. I'll never forget. Later that night, after dancing, laughing, and crying once more, James pulled Sophie outside the venue. Come with me. They walked to the edge of the lake at the vineyard, where floating lights shimmered on the water. It was quiet, only the sound of leaves and the breeze. Remember when you said you were strong enough to let someone go, if it had to be that way? I remember. I came back, but only because I realized there's no peace without you. And now I want to stay, really stay. She squeezed his hand. Then let's stay with each other, and with ourselves too. He pulled her into a hug. Do you still want a CEO? Or would you rather have a clumsy man in love, who still mixes up the entrance doors at parties? I want someone who can find me even with his eyes covered. Then that's who you've got. They kissed right there under the clear sky, and in the background, one of the kids shouted, "Hey, if you kiss any harder, that crooked star will fly away." They laughed, and right then, they understood that life is made of unlikely meetings, mistaken identities, fears, choices. From 0 to 10, what would you rate this story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. James and Sophie's story didn't end with the wedding, it evolved. They settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Sophie kept leading the community project, which had grown into something bigger than she'd ever imagined. Schools adopted her workshops as part of their curriculum, and a documentary crew even reached out to film the kids' journey. She still wore jeans and a name badge most days, but now she carried a quiet pride that didn't need proving. James scaled back his corporate life even further. He took on consulting roles that let him work from home or wherever Sophie was. He traded late-night boardroom debates for early mornings, helping her set up props or brainstorm scripts. I used to think success was a title, he told her one day while they painted a mural with the kids. Now I think it's this. She smiled, paint on her cheek. You're getting soft, Mr. Carter. Only for you, Miss Mendez. Their home became a small apartment near the theater, cluttered with scripts, books, and half-finished art projects. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. On Sundays, they kept their tradition, James making cappuccino with cinnamon, he'd finally mastered it, and Sophie baking cheese bread. They'd sit by the window, talking about nothing and everything, letting the hours slip by. The kids from the project were a constant presence. They'd drop by unannounced, sometimes with new ideas, sometimes just to say hi. One boy, Lucas, became especially close to them. He called James Uncle Jim and once asked, "Are you really a big boss?" "You don't act like one." James laughed. "I used to be. Now I'm just a guy who likes crooked stars." Lucas nodded like that. Made perfect sense. The distance James once put between them in New York faded into a memory they rarely mentioned, but it had left its mark, a reminder that love could bend, stretch, and survive. Sophie never asked him to explain why he'd gone quiet back then, and he never offered excuses. They both knew it had been a detour, not a dead end. One evening, as they walked home from a rehearsal, Sophie stopped under a streetlight. "Do you ever miss it, the suits, the power, the chaos?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I look at you, and I'd trade 1,000 boardrooms for this." She leaned into him. "Good answer." Years passed, but their promise held just one day at a time. The project grew, and so did their family. Not with children of their own, but with the kids they mentored. Lucas, now 16, wrote a play that won a national award. At the ceremony, he dedicated it to Sophie and James. "They taught me the world's bigger when you share it," he said from the stage. Sophie cried, and James squeezed her hand, pretending he wasn't tearing up too. Their life wasn't perfect. There were arguments about time, money, or whose turn it was to clean the paintbrushes. There were days when Sophie doubted herself, and nights when James stared at the ceiling, wondering if he'd given up too much. But they always came back to each other, to the crooked star that started it all. One quiet afternoon, 5 years after the wedding, they sat on a bench outside the theater, watching the kids rehearse through the open window. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold. James pulled out a small box and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, suspicious. "Open it." Inside was a new bracelet, simple leather, with a tiny champagne glass charm. She laughed. "You're ridiculous. I thought it was time to update the collection." The airplane felt lonely. She slipped it on next to the old one, the airplane still dangling from her wrist. "You're still that stylish waiter to me, and you're still the girl who turned my world upside down." They sat there, hands clasped, listening to the kids' voices spill into the street. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was better. It was real, messy, and theirs. Decades later, when their hair had grayed and the theater had new paint, they still showed up. Sophie, with a cane now, taught storytelling workshops. James, slower but still sharp, helped with the sets. The kids, now adults, brought their own children to meet Aunt Sophie and Uncle Jim. One little girl, Lucas's daughter, asked, "Did you really think he was a waiter?" Sophie chuckled. "I did. And he brought me champagne anyway." James winked. "Best order I ever took." The girl giggled, and they smiled at each other, the years folding into a single moment. Their story wasn't about grand gestures or flawless plans. It was about a mistake that became a meeting, a misunderstanding that grew into love, and a choice they made every day until tomorrow became forever.